Hello, everyone. I'm Peaceful Nick the Medium, and today I would like to welcome psychic medium Sean Michael Rutherford to the show. Um, Sean, I keep wanting to say doctor. Sean is a psychic
Not a
medium
doctor.
with over 20 years experience. And I'm so happy that you're here today to tell us all about your journey. So give us an intro, give us your journey. How did you get to the point you are today as a healer?
Well, Nick, thank you so much for having me. I was very excited about this when you asked. You and I have talked to each other for quite some time, and I just adore you. And your story's fabulous. I so I'm from some South Louisiana. I grew up in a family where my mom's family was Cajun, even though that was a 4 letter word we didn't talk about. But due to how a lot of Cajuns were treated like idiots and things like that, my mom tried to dissociate from that idea. But growing up in the house that we lived in, where there was a lot of unique energy and spiritual activity, um, my mom would tell me about how growing up she would feel spirits and that her grandfather who had died helped her find a light in the bathroom when she was a little girl, and so growing up this was a pretty normal thing, albeit not like uh, something that you did for a living.
Mhm.
And then we would start watching Sylvia Brown on Montel, or start
Of
watching,
course, of course.
right? Love her.
Mhm.
I wanted to be her when I grow up. And what we would watch that, and I would say, Mom, I think I'm a medium. And she's like, You're not a medium, you're Cajun. And I'm like, Okay, thanks. Because it was said so almost derogatorily. But then she would talk about how her grandfather would come over, and whenever someone was sick and would lay hands and do healing work with herbs, because the Cajuns who had come down from Canada, there in Canada and here in the South, had very close ties to the Native American people and the indigenous people, and would learn a lot of their ways. They were very welcoming because Cajuns were traders to France. And so no one wanted to welcome them in who was connected to
Mm.
Europe and whatnot. And so he would come over with like a bag of herbs and bark and roots and make up a tea of some sort, and he'd say drink it in French, and her mom would be like just do it. And then the next day she wouldn't have a cough and it was just gone. And so like growing up with this stuff was just very normal.
Mhm.
And so my mom would be like, you're not a medium. That only special people are mediums. You're just Cajun." And I'm like, ouch, thanks, rude. And then at 14, I had severe trauma. I was attacked by 10 guys when I was 14, um, across the street from my house, and I had to go into homeschooling. And I, my mother was raised me to be this kind of person who didn't back down from your fears and your trauma. And so I got kind of agoraphobic. I went into homeschooling and things like that. And I didn't like the fact that I didn't want to be around people. So I would have my dad drop me off at the local mall, huge mall, and leave me, abandon me there all day. And everyone was like, oh my God. And I was like, I was 14, that's fine. And so I would sit and watch people. I would sit and just get in a corner somewhere in the food court, just watch. And I would notice, I'd feel impressions, I'd feel
Mm.
intentions. I could tell, where someone was going. I could tell when someone was coming around a corner. And I started realizing that a big part of my intuition was intentions. And I realized later in my life, when I started doing this much more full time, that this was a big uh, response to my trauma. I knew as a kid that I was very intuitive. I knew looking back that this was me sensing emotions and seeing spirits and stuff like that. But the way I kind of think that it just blew up to what it is was due to trauma. And I think that trauma had to happen for me to be who I am today, because I do this work full time. And yeah, so I went to a little shop where I'm from, and the lady there was like, "Sounds like you're intuitive. You should, learn to read tarot cards." And I was like, "What's that?" And so she's like, "Oh, they're intuitive cards," and I started reading them, and that was a very interesting journey because, using one as an example, like with my tarot deck that I keep with me, I would look at the card and the image would move.
Oh,
and the picture would become sort of like a short animated uh, GIF. I pronounce it with a G, not a J. I don't
I
care.
say GIF. I say GIF.
Oh, it's graphics. Thank you.
That's right.
Um,
That's why. That's right.
right. And so I watch it, and it's like a little GIF where it plays a little short clip. And I found it very odd. I would read for anyone who would sit down for 5 minutes, starting at like 14, 15, and I would see the card play out, and then the card with other cards would play out a little bit longer stories and different stories, like I was watching a movie. And I started doing this for anybody I could sit
That's
down for five
fascinating.
minutes. And I found it, I was like, this is fascinating. This is insane. Let me keep doing this until it just stops because there's no way I'm psychic. I'm just a Cajun. I must be crazy. And so I fully accepted that I was just crazy, schizophrenic or something. And 5 years go by, and I'm still people are like, yeah, you're right. That's accurate. That's accurate. There's no way you could have known that. You know, I was like, okay, I'm just crazy. This is the world I'm living in. And I would sense spirits when I go places. I'm really big into psychometry, which is for those who are watching, psychometry is being able to touch an object and getting the history of it. Like if someone were to give me your glasses, I could sense things that have happened to you in your life. And I love psychometry because we in South Louisiana we have a lot of old buildings, a lot of historical buildings,
Mhm.
and going places. My mom would be like, "What'd you feel in there?" And I was like, "What do you
After
feel?"
saying you're just Cajun.
Right? No, my mom would do that all the time. And so she's like, "Well, of course I can walk into a room and know if like the energy's off. I'm Cajun," and that was the excuse for everything. Um, and so at 19, I sat down and was reading for a coworker's friend, and I pulled the Knight of Discs, which in this deck was the king, and I looked at it and I saw the image of this man riding off into a sunset. And I looked at her again and I could see a man standing behind her. And I was like, okay. And in my head, I'm going off this is just more psychic information. And he's like, she, I died. And I was like, you have a father who passed. She's like, yes. And he shows me a hunting rifle shotgun, and he shows me a chocolate lab, and so I tell her all of this, and she's like, yeah.
Wow.
And then he says, and I heard very clearly, "I love you, pumpkin." I don't remember exactly the phrasing of that, but that's what I use when I explain the story. And she just started bawling.
Mm.
And she explained how every time he'd go to work, he'd leave for work for a couple of weeks because a lot of people here work offshore and things like that. So they're gone for two and back for two. And, and she's like, every time he would leave, he would find me, call me, text me. Uh, I love you, pumpkin. I'll see you
Mm.
soon. And she's like, and I was really busy, and he had to leave very suddenly, and he died on that trip. And I didn't get to hear him say that. And it's the one thing that I wanted to hear him say.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, and that was it verbatim. There's no way that you could have known that.
Right, right.
And I was like, oh, this is an actual difference. I was like, oh, this is some Sylvia Brown stuff. No, thank you.
Now,
Gotta go.
so was
I'm
that
tech.
your first mediumship reading you
That
did?
was my first mediumship, like evidential mediumship reading at
Wow.
19, and I was like, picked up my cards, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not a
It's
medium. I'm just a
overwhelming.
Cajun.
Can I ask you a follow-up question to that? When you
Yeah.
started doing mediumship as you progressed,
Hmm.
obviously, over the years, did you ever feel this overwhelming sense of, I have access to so much information and so much power, it's terrifying?
No. Um, Growing up, uh, and I think one of the things I don't consider myself an elitist. I don't think anyone's better or worse than anyone else. I think my unique story is what wove my tapestry of my life. And I think everyone else's is their tapestry. No one's better or worse. So as I explained, for me, I don't think my experience was any better than anyone's. But growing up with a family where spirituality was such on the forefront, um, and there being such reverence for it. I remember growing up and going outside and having this awareness as like 5, 6, 7 years old. Um, I think God has helpers because there's no way I think that one deity could run everything with all of you. I can feel the trees, the animals being alive and sentient, and there being this. I mean, not to the point I do now, but like there was this awareness of
Right.
everything being vividly alive and aware. And um, but hearing that from my mom about how, grandma would pray for this and so went blind because they were stealing from the church, and your great grandmother, great great grandmother, who was a settler here from was a refugee here, had their land stolen by the state to build a salt mine. She cursed it and people died.
Mm.
Like there being this like reverence for how connected everything was as a child, even though it was. My mom said it in, I don't say not jokingly ways, but in probably wasn't real, but you never know kind of ways. I think I grew up going into this with the weight of this is serious because I always took it very seriously. Like picture like a 17-year-old with the ethics that I have now. Like this is how I've been my whole life,
Mhm.
and very like I could hurt someone with this. I was more willing to read people without their permission because I wasn't sort of aware of that because I'm in public at a coffee shop. I can see someone laughing. I can see someone crying. So being able to pick up their energy is as legal ethically as watching them cry. But I also realized I don't need to watch them cry. I can look away and give them privacy. And I was like,
Right.
that's fair. So I didn't feel that weight, but I've always felt a reverence for the work in that something's watching, something has rules and order to obey. And then in my occult training, that sense of just uh, awareness of the checks and balances of the universe. And so I was like, okay, um, I understand what you're talking about, but I think because of growing up the way I did and educated, it was always taught with such reverence. It didn't feel like such a weight to me. It felt like an awareness and something I always had to be part of. But I know what you're talking about. It is quite can be overwhelming to
Yeah.
have this realization that there are people watching us at all times. And to explain that to your clients, I'm like, your loved ones are watching you, and they're like, even when I'm in the shower,
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly. I get that question all the time. Like, what's
baby,
everything?
you birthed out your mama's hoo-ha. She knows what you look like. Come down, you know. And then that's where boundaries come in. Like I tell my mama, I was like, if you see me undressed, no, you don't. Have a good day.
Just pretend it's not happening. Just pretend it's not happening. I
Right?
I want to address the fact, and I love that you mentioned this, that your trauma experience
Yeah.
led you to where you are, because I also have a background of trauma. That's another story for another day. But I believe that led me to be who I am today,
Yeah.
regardless of what route I took to get there. So can you talk about how that helps you lead with compassion in your healing practice?
Um, growing up as a fat child, and a very soft-hearted child, I've been bullied. The first time I remember being bullied, I was 5 years old, and it was like the first couple of days of kindergarten. And one of the other kids, whose name I shall omit just because of, and we were fighting over my pencil. He took it from me. It was in front of me. He took mine and stabbed me with it. Like, I mean, like like we were fighting over, and he pushed it into my stomach, and I still have, you can still see like the
I have
gray
pencil
ink.
lead in my leg from getting stabbed in school by a
Look
pencil.
at this. Look at
I can
this.
show you the spot. It's still
It's
there.
it's under my chest. And so I went to the teacher, and she's like, I'm sure it was an accident. There was no care whatsoever. And going home, I remember being hit with this, like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Um and then I had other little bullies, and like one girl made fun of me in line. My mom told me, she's like, if she ever does that again, you tell her like I might be fat, but I could lose weight. You'll always be ugly. And I made her cry. And
Hmm.
I hated it. I
Hmm.
hated it. And my mom realized that the retaliatory getting back was just not who I ever was going to be. And so um, when I got attacked at 14, I had already lived a life of being bullied every day of my life. It was a severe issue in school that had been brought up several times to no remediation. Um, the when I got attacked, I was going across the street to get my mom a Diet Coke. She'd give me a $10 bill. I didn't get mugged. They didn't take the money. They just attacked me from behind. They were between the ages of 16 and 19. And I,
Just for sheer cruelty?
yeah,
Just to be,
I was there. It was 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It was dark. Literally, I mean, right across the street from my house. We lived directly across from a gas station. And I'm literally just walking it, and they were coming out of the city park because the street we were on led right into the city park. And smaller town, not like a huge city or anything, which doesn't really matter. And and it happened, and there was a witness, and she was, so we get to court, and I remember seeing them that night. I get attacked. I run into the gas station to call my mom. She calls her friend who lived around the corner, who was close friends with the chief of police. They um, caught all of them, brought them to jail. Um, we got a call later that night that all of their parents were picking them up, beating the crap out of them for doing this. And
so
I
that's not
remember
a
looking,
solution.
no. And I remember looking to my mom, and my brother laughed at me almost for years about this. I said, "Well, now I know why they did it."
Yeah,
And they looked at me like all the adults in this room, like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, they have a lot of anger, and so they
right.
saw someone that they could get lash out on." I said I wasn't going to outrun them. They were thin, I was not, and there was 10 of them. There was one of me, and so I said that must suck to have people have parents that just abuse you like that.
Right.
And I said, and my brother was like, "What's wrong with him?" And my mom was like,
He sees,
that's your little brother." And so we
he's
went to court,
Cajun.
right? Yeah. He's sensitive. He has a soft heart. We went to court, and I remember us asking for like community service. And like I didn't want them to go to jail. I didn't want anything like that. I wanted them to, I wanted them to pay for what they did, but I didn't want it to be something that ruined their lives. And they did. And so it was one of these things like growing up, compassion and everything always, and nothing came easy because I certainly have people I wish I could hate.
Mhm.
Um, but my thing about my what I think my real gift and my intuition and my being able to see into people is my ability to see and sense intention. Like when
Mhm.
someone does something, I can tell you why they did it. I can
Mhm.
tell you, and I can see.
It's a superpower, but
Yeah,
it's a
it's this.
double-edged sword.
It is. Like my father was very mentally, verbally abusive. My father used to tell me all the time, growing up as a teen, nobody liked me, nobody wanted to know me. All my friends hated me. They were just fair weather friends. Nobody actually liked me. I was just a dumb kid. But I could see in him a pain that there was something wrong with that he experienced. And I later found out that he was very traumatized by his parents, by his dad when he was a kid. And so I was like, trauma begets trauma. And so like here I am, 38, I'm 38 at the end of this month. And I look back and it's been 24 years. And I'm like, good Lord.
When's
Okay.
your birthday?
At the end of the month. I don't give
Oh,
the
okay.
date
My
publicly.
son's birthday
Uh
is next week. That's what I was asking.
birthday. And so I remember looking at my dad and being like, he was a victim. And I find this work means we don't really get to see um, perpetrators. We just get to see victims.
Yeah.
We don't
Yes.
really get we don't really get to see someone as an arbiter of harm. We see them as a victim of harm. And while I do, and I advocate be angry at them. My dad has since passed. He passed in 2019. I told him, I was like, I hated that you did this to me. And even after in spirit, I was like, I don't want to freaking talk to you. I have to remember I'm trying to not cuss. I'm Cajun. I mean, we cuss. So
I'm
I was taught
Italian, so do we.
I was taught how to cuss in French as a child. I was like, before I could tie my shoes. And so, um, so him and I have had a very interesting relationship because he only comes through when he's trying to help me fix things. Because my
Mm,
dad used to build furniture and stuff like that. Like he helped me fix my witch's cabinet, and so. But him and I have had conversations where I've worked to forgive him and things like that, and um, I do acknowledge that he did this thing. I also acknowledge that he was a victim of abuse. And so this work has really caused me to have this understanding of like, okay, this trauma happened to me. It definitely intensified the work that I do and how I sense things. Because now I can tell the day we had the incident on New Year's here in New Orleans, with the bombing. Um, well, not bombing. There was the truck that blew up. Um, uh, I was in the French Quarter with friends celebrating New Year's Eve, and I was going to go riding around. I like to just drive right around, and I had a very strong leave, go home,
mm,
get out of the French Quarter right now.
yeah.
And I was like, no, I think I'm going to hang out and I'll stay in the area because I'm going to pick up my friends once they're done. And it was like, no, go home.
Yeah.
And it had already been midnight. We already did the celebration. I get home and then see that the attack had gone off,
Mm.
and I was like, that area where it went off is one of the areas that I would have been driving around. And I'm not saying I would have been affected by it, but I would have been wrapped up in
Yeah.
stuck in the traffic, stuck
Yeah.
part of the whole thing, and would have been affected by it. And so I think a lot of times people want to make intuition some beautiful, like magical thing, and it is, even if you're not kidding. Um, but it's an alarm system. Whether it's an alarm system to let you know, I wouldn't trust that deli meat anymore. It's past its expiration, or it's, I feel like my life's in danger. Or especially with women when they know that the man they're with is safe or not safe to be with. That's a
Mhm.
huge red flag. I was like, we used to be very intuitive people when we were cavemen, cave people, when
Was
we
just
were
making a
primitive.
note to mention that
Yeah,
exact thing.
we were very intuitive, and especially so back when we were not want to say prehistoric people, but we were pre-modern people. Um, when you were a kid and your mom was a gatherer and you were following her into the woods,
You had to be
you
alert.
had to be aware of what
No.
she was sensing
Yeah.
without her being able to make a noise.
Yep.
And I work with a lot of people who have autistic children who want to understand the intentions because I'm very good at understanding intentions. What's going on with their autistic children. And I don't read for children directly, but I'll read for the parents. And I was like, you have to understand that they go off of all of your energy.
Hmm.
And they're like, well, how do they know? I said, well, just the way that a child who, from prehistoric people, would have sensed their mother sensing danger.
Yes.
And the
Because we're
mom,
animals.
correct. We can sit there and go, oh, we're humans, but we are
We're animals.
animals. We
Yeah.
are fauna. We might act like we're at the top of the food chain, but it's only because we've made ourselves. If I'm in the ocean, I am not the top of the food chain. If
Yeah.
I'm on the savannah, I am not the top of the food chain. And
Exactly.
so, one, because I outrun nothing. Now, a hippo might think I'm another hippo, but that's another conversation. But the and an alligator knows I'm just going to eat it. So, um, but yeah, we're animals, and we have that prey mentality. We also have predator mentality,
Mhm.
but and so I tell people like a lot of it is just us sensing the world around us because, and this is why I love you so much, Miss Scientist. Nothing that we see that is tangible is actually tangible. It is not
100%.
physical. It is vibrations of vibrations of vibrations. And when people are like, well, sound is a vibration, light's a vibration, yes. And just like it affects us, the vibrations vibrate our eardrums, which allow us to hear it.
Hmm.
Our physical body is vibrating because it's
Yes.
atoms moving very slowly. I
Yes.
mean, relatively. And the world around us is atoms vibrating. I was like, all of that is that ripple of energy of life is eventually going to get to you.
Yeah.
And that's when I started doing all that, when I started getting to that way of thinking through occultism and things like that, because occultism, there's a lot of that cause and effect, and that you see a lot in physics. Um,
But physics doesn't know they're agreeing. And that's what I talk about that all the time because the atoms we're made of at the most fundamental level are just energy. It's just
Yes.
energy. There's
When
if our electrons stopped vibrating around this nucleus of the atoms, we would fall apart instantly.
yeah,
We are 99.9% nothing.
one of the principles, and I think it's a Hermeticism. I'm not a I have a horrible memory when it comes to remembering names for things, but I think it's Hermeticism, which talks about the you have the principles which are like cause and effect, polarity. Magnetism is one of those things where we understand that magnetism is what holds all life together.
Mhm.
The vibration of our atoms to our nucleus is magnetism,
Right.
and
It's
it's keeping
plus
it
and
together.
minus.
There
I've
we
taught,
go.
that's how I used to teach it. That's exact. When I taught physics, that's how I taught it.
The ancient magicians, the ancient occultists, knew that. Now
Yeah.
they didn't know it like we know it today, where they knew they were atoms. They thought they were solid. They thought they were like rocks, but technically they are because it's all atoms. But like
Right.
so, but like they understand that there's polarity, there is cause and effect, there's all these things, and then physics comes along and goes, "Hey, that's a scientific principle." Is it?
Right.
Is it though?
Right.
We
They
found
just
it first.
they put labels on everything we other people already knew
Correct.
and called it physics. Yeah.
And it's fine.
Yeah.
Physics is, to me, the most magical science because it is, of all the sciences, one of the few that I can actually understand, but it intersects with
You're one of the
occultism.
few because physics, most students don't get it. You're one of the
I've
few.
had long conversations with physics teachers and science teachers, and I'm like, no, this fully makes sense. Like string theory fully makes sense to me,
Oh,
one
my
hundred
favorite.
thousand
Yeah.
percent.
Love string
And
theory.
so I think growing up with trauma as a core part of my experience, to get back to your question, I think it taught me the true signs of like cause and effect.
Hmm.
Because when I experienced trauma, I realized that, that being a cause led to the effect of me learning compassion. I did not want to ever be the cause of somebody else's trauma. So compassion was my effect. Intuition was my effect. And then when I went throughout life, of course, I've had arguments with people. I'm a Cajun. I can tear you down with my words. I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in physical violence, but I can absolutely make you question your entire life with a sentence. And um, so I'm not saying I've never emotionally hurt someone when I've gotten, heated. I am a human being and I'm not perfect. But I find my intuition has made me a lot more aware of cause and effect and how people are affected by each other, um, and has led me to be less judgmental, which in turn has made me a better medium. Because if you judge the spirit that you are working with or the person that you're reading for, you're already starting the session with a disadvantage.
Hmm. From the ego. And I want to mention something
Mm-hmm.
about trauma. I was watching Mayim Bialik's breakdown the other day, and Deepak Chopra was on there. And it's going to just make me burst into tears. He said, hate is a cry for love.
Yes.
And I screen recorded it and reposted it on my socials because I think everything that's ever been wrong with humanity from ancient times to current times is people who are hateful and cause trauma and problems and abuse to others because they lacked love.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental flaw in humanity. And that's causes, I'd say, 99% of our problems, if I had to put
Mm-hmm.
a number on it. Um, and it just struck me the way he said it because it's so simple and so accurate.
When we look at people like, I mean, I'm so used to using social media slang because I don't want to affect. When we look at someone like a Hitler,
Hmm.
while what he did is irreprehensible, it is to a magnitude of there is no uh there is no uh explaining why. I mean, it was an atrocity that is beyond uh fathom. Um, but we can look back in his history in how he was abused and
Hmm.
how he was an artist. He was a vegetarian, which usually comes from compassion, not wanting to kill animals, not wanting to hurt things, and dealt with severe trauma and abuse. And I believe, and I'm not, again, in no way do I condone, like there's no forgiving what he did
Right.
and what he caused and what people like him caused. Um, but we can see this connection to him wanting adoration,
Yes.
wanting appreciation, wanting to be
Yeah.
seen as powerful because he was made to feel small by his family, by his mother. And so, again, does not at all make okay what he did. But I use that as an example because it is such an extreme example where small amounts of trauma, we don't know how it's going to affect someone's mentality because we don't know where they are mentally. I believe he was obviously mentally not okay, even before he did all that. But it triggered, I think, his sociopathic
Right.
brain to become psychopathic. And so I think that this, now I'm not a psychological professor, I'm not a psychologist or anything, so this is me just speaking from like personal interest in like studying people's mentalities and intentions. But so please know that anyone who's watching this, I don't use these terms from a professional standpoint. Just want to put that
Right.
out there.
Right. Disclaimer.
Um,
Disclaimer.
just disclaimer, because I'm very big on I'm trying to be very respectful of professions that do this. But when I look at anyone who has done atrocious things, looking at my father, who was mentally abusive to me, I later found out that his dad and his mom, my father, okay, so my father, when he was 10, I think it was 10, um, he was born in 1947. So 10 would be 57. My father was contracted bacterial meningitis.
Oh, wow.
And you know about how bad that is.
Yeah.
Back in the 50s, 57, early, almost 60, he was sent here to Tulane, New Orleans, to the children's ward, where he was in quarantine with about 80 other boys,
Mm.
going through treatment for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Couldn't really have visitors. His mom had to force his way in, and because she was like that, I loved her. Um, he and one other boy were the only ones who survived out of 80. And he watched them die because they
Yeah.
died. They were all in barracks
And
style,
horrific
horrifically. And
meningitis.
so he and one other boy survived. And I that was one of the things that later when I learned this in my late teens, because it was something that was kind of kept from me, which as a child I could understand. I'm not wanting to talk about that. Even though we talked about dead people, but okay. So uh my mom told me about how when I was 18, 19, that he'd gone through this and that they had had marriage therapy, marriage counseling, and her psychologist said that he likely had brain trauma
I'm
due
sure.
to the bacterial meningitis in the brain. And she witnessed him seemingly having decreased capability of empathy,
Mm.
where he could see someone and sympathize that they felt something, but he couldn't understand why. So growing up, I would later was like, oh, that's why he was the way he was.
Yeah.
Whether that had not been officially diagnosed or anything, but I was like, okay, and then found out that because of this, his parents never let him do anything.
Mm.
He was an amazing baseball player in his teens. A scout came out to see him, and they're like, "Oh no, Michael's never going to do anything. He was very sick as a kid. He'll never be able to make it in the majors or the minors. You should watch his brother." And they would not let him have any
Oh,
airtime. And he was amazing. The coach was like, "No, don't watch his brother. Watch him." He was an amazing golfer. My dad did amazing things, but his family just always pushed him down. And I think it's because
yeah.
his parents saw him as weak because of the meningitis. And so he had a life of being torn down. So what did
Which
he do?
sometimes causes you to
Tear
tear
others down.
others down.
Exactly. And that's what he did to me. He made me small. He would always tell me that there's no way I could ever take care of myself, and very abusive and things like that. And so trauma, it goes when we, and this is one of the things that you and I agree on, where I believe the more we acknowledge the darkness, the more we can see the light. I live in a
Yes.
major city. I live in New Orleans. I know what light pollution looks like.
Hmm.
And I know light pollution only does one thing, and it keeps me from being able to see the stars.
Right.
And I believe that when we are toxically positive, when we refuse to acknowledge our shadows and our traumas and our darkness, it causes us not to see the true light that we are capable of shining. And So it's one thing that I think why I've always been very obsessed about trauma. And I've just seen a therapist since I was a child. I've always done therapy. I want to know my heart. I don't shadow journal. I hate journaling.
I don't journal.
My
I don't
ADHD is
journal.
like, no. But I will always kind of like in mentally journal my day
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. But I think trauma can be the greatest lesson or the greatest harm. And I think a lot of
You go
mediums,
one way or the other.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of mediums and psychics and healers are people who were capable of going one way that helped people from their trauma. And I think other people who are traumatized and harm others went the other way. And I don't judge them for it. I do think they need the help to fix it, but I don't judge them for it.
I
I
want to
was lucky.
say I want to say something about that. I've been like doodling little notes as you've
I
been.
thought it was cute.
And one of the things I want to say to anybody who's watching the replay is Sean is saying there's an explanation for the behaviors of Hitler, his dad, other abusers, not an excuse. So for anybody
Absolutely.
thinking, oh, he's just making excuses for bad, no, he's explaining
Mm-mm.
the cause. And people like you and I, are you an Aries?
I'm a Pisces.
Oh, you're a Pisces. Okay.
Well, okay, that's a whole conversation. I don't do Western astrology because it's
Oh, okay.
wrong. I do Vedic astrology, which is correct. I'm a Vedic Pisces, and that's what I go by.
Okay. So people like you and I are so understanding and compassionate. We see the reason, the intent, the explanation. Doesn't excuse the behavior, doesn't say it's okay for somebody to do bad things. It just helps us feel better
Yeah.
to understand why somebody
I
did something.
I am fully behind the punishment following the crime. I do not believe that if you do something wrong, it should be excused. If you do something wrong, you face the penalty of it, especially when it comes to you ruining somebody else's life. I look at someone like Hitler and I'm like, no, he deserved
I have
everything he
20
got.
follow-up questions. Okay, so
Yeah, 5,000. Let's do this.
I
Rapid
want to
fire.
talk first. I want to ask you this question because this question comes up from clients of mine all the time. What do you think happens when somebody like Hitler passes away?
Oh gosh.
I
So
get a
I
lot of this, a lot. That's my number one question.
yep.
You're like, but Hitler had to go to hell.
The question I get with that is because people want to rationalize that someone like that is going to suffer after life. I'm going to make the statement, and I apologize if it's something that offends anybody. I want to make it very clear that these are my thoughts, my opinions. That's it. I think anybody who wants someone to suffer is problematic. I'm not saying that they should not face the penalty for their actions. If you unalive someone, you go to jail. If you get the death penalty, you get the death penalty. Like you do the crime, you get the time. That's my rule. I believe in that. And I sleep just fine at night because of that. So, um, however, on a soul level, I believe the soul in someone. We're just using Hitler for an example because that's an atrocity that we all understand that that's a pinnacle of atrocities.
Right.
Um, Someone like Hitler, I believe, has a soul that is held captive by an ego that is broken.
Mm.
And I believe on a soul level, that soul is watching these atrocities happen like a child being abused. And I do not believe that on a soul level, any soul would actually want to do that. Because when we look at atoms and we look at neurons and protons and all those sciencey things, um, we know that that while there is a positive and negative in the scientific and in the universe, it's not negative as in bad. It's negative as in polarity, which creates magnetism, which
Because we
creates
have
energy.
defined things in a certain way, which gives a
Correct.
skewed relationship with what's
Correct.
actually happening.
And so I do not believe that energy is anything but neutral.
Hmm.
I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. I think it's neutral. I think with that, there comes a sense of I don't want to harm, nor do I want to give a better hands up advantage. I want to experience. I do believe that when things get too bad, it's held captive because it would not want, as a soul, as energy, to do harmful things.
So when you mean held captive, so let me just give you a 2 second explanation.
Certainly.
When people ask me about that, I say everyone goes to the spirit world.
Yeah.
Now, they automatically think, I mean, Hitler went to heaven and he's
No.
hanging with God and Jesus and having a good old time on a cloud with an angel. And that is not what I mean at all.
When a soul is in the body and it's doing horrible, the person that is the ego that it's connected to in that body, when the soul is incarnated in life, I feel it is held captive during the atrocities happening. So it is not, it is Jiminy Cricket from Disney, um, as a conscience trying to get the person to stop, but it is held captive.
Mhm. Because our
Um,
soul is non-local to our body,
correct,
but
correct.
sometimes it's in there.
Our willpower and our ego is connected to our body. It is in the makeup of our brain.
Right.
So it has more control over our soul. If someone is not capable of hearing the conscience of the soul, it's not going to listen at all. So the soul is a bit trapped, for lack of a better word, where it is incapable of doing anything, but it's watching these atrocities happen.
It's in the
I
body for the duration of that
Yeah,
life.
it's in a movie theater watching the body do this thing, and it can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
It's on a ride, and the ride is broken, and so
Yeah,
and it
exactly.
is stuck on a roller coaster,
Right.
like just broken. And so when the body dies, the soul goes back into the universe, and I believe is healed if it's been short traumatically severe, like if someone did a couple bad things, stole, hurt someone. It goes through a healing process and is required to help heal whatever ugliness it caused. So they might get a job helping drug addicts overcome their drug addiction, things like that.
Right.
um I have experienced what I've asked my guides and spirits, because I'm nosy. I'm nosy. I'm like, what happened? What happened to Schmittler? And
Mhm.
they're like, he's in a box somewhere. And they put that to me because that's kind of what I, as a human, can understand. That they have all explained to me that he's sort of off in a little pocket dimension where the trauma that happened to him sort of unraveled the energy of his soul in a way that cannot interact with the world ever again,
Mm.
because it is so frayed because of the atrocities it watched happen. And I see that more so as someone who has become agoraphobic.
Mm.
There's no way, like, I picture this as a soul going, there's no amount of healing that I would be capable of doing in 1,000 lifetimes that would fix or repair or balance out what I caused. But I can remove myself from ever getting to participate again on the fear that I might do that again.
Can I ask you a question?
And
Uh,
that's just what I've experienced.
do you think that, and I'm just randomly, this popped into my head.
You're
Do you
fine.
think his soul could, like, because I'm sure you've read Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, and he talks about souls being able to go have an incarnation on another planet to have kind of a rest life, you know? Do you think his soul could go somewhere else where there are no humans he can mess with?
I
He's just
I,
locked
I I've
away.
I've not read that book. I've not read that book. I don't do a lot of reading because of my dyslexia.
You can
But I
get
do
it
it.
on audiobook.
I
It's
do a lot of discussions with people who have read books where we discuss them. So I like hearing them from other people's perspective. I do need to do more audiobooks. Um, but that's good to know that I can get that on audiobook. Thank you for telling me that. I don't know. I don't know about the incarnating on other planets. I do believe in ETs. I do believe there's. I think it's egotistical to say that there's no life anywhere else in the universe, as expansive and limitless as that universe is. So I'm not saying I don't know. I think it would almost be more along the lines of him, because we know multiple dimensions exist, not in the 5D aspect, but in the sense that if there's a 3D and there's a 2D, there's a 4D and a 5D and things like that. I could more see that his soul would have unraveled a bit to go down to like the 2D, where it can't affect reality,
Hmm.
because nothing above it, our the 3D world is not affected by the 2D world, but vice versa. 3D world can affect the 2D world. Just like we can't affect the 4D world, the 4D world, which is time, can affect us. Um, I feel like it's something like that where he and I feel and I this is look, this might be a little too much compassion than people would like. I think this is a decision he made. I think whatever is happening to him on a soul level, because I do not feel, and because I've had this question a lot of times, because I get that question from people all the time too. Um, every time I ask it, I keep getting the response from different souls, different intuitive things, that he is not part of the human karmic cycle anymore, that he
Mhm.
is not incarnating anymore.
Interesting.
Um, and so, but every time I get a sense of it being a sense of shame.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed of what happened. I will never be able to fix it. I don't deserve to be part of the world and enjoy things. Um, and so they, thems have imprisoned themselves away in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the most, I think that would be the most thing that we could expect as punishment. Because now the souls of anyone who was hurt get to come back and get to have better lives, hopefully, maybe.
Yeah.
And he never will.
And
He'll never, and so I don't know if that's good or bad. That's always kind of what I felt. And that's not that I don't think about this topic very often until it comes up, but
but it comes up. It comes
it
up
does.
in
It
our
do.
yeah. So that brings me to toxic positivity
Oh,
and spiritual bypassing and emotional bypassing and trauma bypassing and people who, get sober and all of a sudden they're the happiest person alive and find religion and now everything's fine.
baby, you talking to a witch who talks to dead people. Like there is nothing. There is the most anti-positive, positive. And then what's crazy is that me from my TikToks and my lives, and what I always say, as always, from Auntie Sean, in love and light. I believe in that as a force of positivity, of love and light. I want to express and be loving and light when I'm doing this work.
Right.
However, that is because in my life, I might stub my toe on my bed and get angry and cuss my bed out and let
Right.
myself feel my feelings
Right.
and be like, I don't want that to ever happen to a person. So I'm going to choose to be positive with my interactions with sentient beings, living humans or animals or spirits. But that's a bed frame. I'm gonna cuss it out. I'm gonna kick it again. So like I experience the reverse of the negativity because we have to. Toxic positivity has become like the herpes of the spiritual world,
So let's
where
define for those watching what toxic positivity is. My opinion is, and you can share yours, toxic positivity is when someone doesn't feel the feelings of any pain, that of any trauma they've experienced, and all of a sudden they're just this positive light. And there's nothing wrong with being positive. It's
nothing.
when you didn't feel it, when you didn't heal it, and all of a sudden you're positive, that's toxic because it's still in there and it will manifest in some way. Whether you become
Correct.
anorexic or you become a gambler or a heroin addict or an abuser, whatever it is, that pain doesn't go away. It just
Correct.
manifests in some way.
Also, greedy, someone who worked their butt off, who made millions of dollars off the backs of employees and is like, oh, I found myself and now I'm a nice person on my yacht and I'm a billionaire and I don't work anymore. And yeah, okay, but have you processed the fact that you were terrible to your employees?
Right.
Have you
Right.
processed the fact that
No,
you
they
only
haven't.
made your millions and billions off of the backs of people working poverty wages?
Right.
No,
They haven't.
you haven't. That's toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is also the idea that we can ignore our past because, in my opinion, it's not just about being positive or negative. It's about, oh well, today's a new day. No,
Hmm.
baby, today is another day. It is a new day, but it is another day. Um, time is an illusion. It's something that we make up to give ourselves a sense of control, but
Hmm.
it is just another day. It is just a planet going around the sun. We've given it time, but we see growth. We see things happen over these days, but it doesn't allude to time. And so the thing about it is that you can sit there, what's a new day? But have you processed? Have you accepted that your past is your past? Or have you put it in a trunk and you're just carrying it in your backseat of your car?
Right. Right.
Because that is now a weight on your car, causing gas mileage to be low. And
Right.
eventually your car's going to break down. You're going to blame somebody else. But all your back of your car is full of 50,000 pounds of junk.
Right. Right.
And so it's like, it isn't processing it, but it's also just the realization of like, you can't just tomorrow will be better. The other thing is that like, oh, when we die, everything's love and light. No, I do believe that there's no hell. I do believe things are love and light and spirit, but I also know that I've experienced souls having jobs and making up for things that they did in life.
Right.
Having a parent who was atrocious, my dad being abusive. My dad said, now that I've passed, I'm going to help you in your life fix things that I broke
Hmm.
to
My
make
mother
up
guides
for.
me and helps me, and she passed when I was 15. And uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I want to say about the people, the spirit world is all love and light,
Yeah.
which in a way it is peaceful. But I tell people my experience is when someone comes through in a reading that's been horrific to the
Hmm.
sitter, they briefly come in to apologize always.
Oh, yeah.
Um, they go through their life review and they feel the feelings they made
Yeah.
everyone feel. So
Yep.
the more horrible
From
you
that other person's perspective.
exactly how so which can vary from person to person.
Hmm.
Everybody doesn't feel the same way about different things. But your dad will have
Hmm.
gone through his life review and felt
Exactly.
every single ache and pain he ever caused you, magnified, I'm sure.
I was reading for I don't remember if it was a young man or a young woman, I'm not really sure. They were in their 20s. Their father had passed, and I think it was a young man because something about a baseball game. Um, the dad showed me, clear as a bell, a baseball game. I could describe the uniform. I could describe a play that was made. I could describe what the mom was wearing. I could describe, like, I didn't know the date and time, but I could describe everything I could see. And dad goes, I did not make it to that game. I chose to work instead. Mom went. I didn't make it to a lot of his games. He got a home run in this game and was very, very hurt that I missed this like important game for him. So I described that. He's like, no, he wasn't there. That's not true. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm telling you, he knows he wasn't there. He went back and watched it.
Mm.
He went back and watched you hit this home run, come into to home base and look into the crowd and see that you weren't there and felt
The
angry.
feeling. Yeah.
And he realized in that moment by being there and watching it and seeing your hurt, how much that hurt you. And he wants me to he wanted me to tell you that it's okay that you were angry at your mom because he wasn't there to be angry at.
Right.
And he started bawling and he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, always felt guilty that I was angry to her. How did he know that? I was like, because he
They
went
know.
back. I was
They
like, he
know.
went back to
Hmm.
experience everything that he missed
Hmm.
because he realized that that's part of it too. Like their life review isn't just about their life. It's about the life of everyone that they've loved, everyone they affected, everyone that they experienced. Because we, as human beings, because we are tangible and have boundaries of skin and flesh and bone, like to think that we are not unified as a being, but we are.
Yes.
We are community. We are as connected as bees, and we need that connection because anytime we see someone go off into their own thing and disconnect from the hive, they go insane.
And
And so,
I love that you said the high, like
yeah,
I believe it's a collective consciousness.
I agree.
All
I
of
fully
our
agree.
conscious awareness are connected. That's why when communities are having issues like 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
happened? Everybody came together and felt that,
Yeah,
and helped. And I mean, we could go on for
we
hours
see
about that.
this. We see this plain and simply, and I'm not getting political, I'm just being very matter of factly. When we see communities like Black people, and especially Black women and women in general, get torn down by the people that consider themselves superior, which they're not because no one is superior than anyone else.
Correct.
When we
Ego,
see that,
all
we
ego.
see communities crumble on all levels because when you marginalize one community, regardless of who they are, it starts to have its effect
Right.
because everything in life is cause and effect.
Right.
And when we do this with women, especially, which are the harbingers of humanity, who are the ones who give birth to children, are the
Without
ones who,
women, there'd be nobody.
correct. And I'm not saying women are better than men because the seed is needed to plant a garden. But if the soil is toxic because you've made it toxic and you've stressed women out and they're not capable of having children because their hormones are out of whack because they're dealing with horrible people because they're always afraid of being hurt, they're not going to have healthy children. And I'm not saying
Right.
there's anything wrong with unhealthy children. This is no judgment. I'm nothing
Right.
to women, nothing to it's just
Just
there's no judgment.
explain the
This
process.
is this is why, like as a community, spirit sees us as a oneness. And is like, if y'all don't get your crap together and start being nice to each other, everything's gonna fall apart.
Right.
And we see this throughout history
Yes. Repeatedly. Repeatedly.
because spirit sees it as a oneness. And that's why I was like, when we have toxic positivity, we ignore that pain can be an amazing teacher or an amazing abuser, or not amazing in a good way, but a detrimental abuser. Um, and we can learn from that. In occult training and occultism, we're taught hexes and curses and things like that. Because one of the things that I had a mentor tell me that in order to be a divine healer, you must know how to make malignant poisons.
Mm.
And he's like, because it's only through understanding the poison can you reverse it. And I was like, holy crap. I
Yeah.
was like, you're right. Doctors don't,
Mind blowing. Like
yeah,
in Star
doctors,
Wars, when the bad guy said to Anakin, evil is a point of view.
yeah. And it's like doctors study remedies after they've studied diseases. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So
Right.
as a person, like they're like, well, why have you studied baneful work? Because I can't undo someone's baneful work if I don't know how it's done.
Exactly. You have to understand it.
Correct. And so in life, if we learn to understand our traumas, we can understand how to move through them. Um, much like I love this experience, and I love bringing up simple ways to understand this. Toxic positivity is going out on a solar eclipse and going, it's okay, it's just light. I'm going to look at the sun. I want to see the solar eclipse. And going, it's okay. The blinding is fine. It's natural. I'm fine. I'm okay. True healing is going, I could do that. I'm going to go blind. The light's going to hurt my eyes. However, if I acknowledge the pain and choose to use these special equipped sunglasses because I've acknowledged the pain, I can have the view of the solar eclipse and keep my eyes after.
Right. Exactly. I love
And
that.
that is a very simple explanation of if we identify the pain, if we acknowledge the trauma, and choose to do the healthy thing, we can have the best of
And
both
with
worlds.
and without acknowledging it, we're not truly healed. And
We sear our retinas.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I want to ask you before we wrap up, because I don't
So
want
sorry. And I know I've just been going on with these things, but like
no.
these
I
are,
could talk to you about 800 other subjects, and we
yes,
can record
same.
another one later for sure.
Love
Um,
that. Part two.
Part
Part
two
two.
coming. What is your most memorable experience as a healer? And then I want you to list all of your offerings and specials.
Okay. So I'm gonna do one. I have three quick ones. One is a tarot reader, and then a psychic, one is a medium, and then one is a crystal spiritual healer. Because each one has offered something different. And the tarot reading, one of my favorite ones was when I read for a house, and I think it definitely intersected with mediumship a bit. But I was doing a tarot reading for a house that was haunted, and it was kind of like I was like 20. It was one of my first real experiences where I got part of a spiritual investigation group. I read for the house, and in the cards, I'm looking at all this crap. The homeowner hated the people who moved in because they were neighbors as kids, and they would trespass on her lawn. I kept seeing like issues and problems in the cards, and they're like, "Yeah, we did all the time." And I'm like, "And when she died, you moved into her house, and you want to know why your house is haunted? Are you couillon?" Cajun, that's Cajun for dum dum. Um, as a medium, one of the most crazy, and that's something that stuck out to me as a tarot reader because I was reading the house as a tarot, and I loved how it told that story so clearly,
Right.
through the way the cards laid out. And it was one of the more memorable ones to me, even though I've done it for had other experiences. That was one of the ones that I loved because it just told on them like reading a book. The cards were like, "We're with the homeowner. We're with the
Right.
old lady who died." The cards were
Right.
like, "No."
Right.
I totally believe tools like tarot have minds of their own, and I use them as such as their own um, sentient beings. Um, then as a medium, I was one of my first clients that I was taking after I went through some mentoring. Her grandmother came through, and I have been given permission to tell the story. I was reading for her, and she was someone I knew for a while. And her grandmother came through, and never met the grandmothers, things like that. She had died before I even met this woman. Her grandmother comes through, and the grandmother tells me to tell her, uh, mention that I was married twice, and the second time was a scandal.
Mm.
And I was like, no. And she's like, this is a Southern old grandma. And she's like, boy, I said, you better tell her. And I was like,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
some,
Yeah.
Nisha, that's some drama. I'm not sure if I want to get into, Sha. And she's like, I said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Your grandmother wants me to tell you that she was married twice and the second time was a scandal. And she's like, no, I only had one grandfather. She only had one husband as long as I can remember. And I was like, she said, she you wrong. And Spirit's like, no boy, I know you're not calling me wrong because Southern Cajun women, old women down here are big about that. Ma'am, is she saying that's wrong? I don't know what you want me to do. Because this is the first time I started taking clients and like doing it, like really doing it
And
intentional.
spirit always knows.
Oh, Spirit always knows. I don't listen to human beings for nothing. So living people, I don't trust them for nothing.
That's
Um, so she's
the
like,
title of our life story.
yeah, right. I don't trust human beings for nothing. So I said, look, your grandmother just keeps telling me this, keeps telling me this, keeps telling me this. And she's getting mad at me and she's giving me that, boy, I'm gonna beat you. And I was like, and she's kind of scaring me. So I'm just gonna leave you with that. Okay. So I get a call 2 weeks later from
Mm.
her.
Always,
And
always.
I said, hey, what's happening? And she's like, Sean, how the hell did you know that? And I was like, how the hell know what? Because I don't remember reading.
Yeah, I
I said,
usually.
remember what? And she's like, that my grandmother. I was like, oh yeah. She's like, I talked to my mother. We went to visit her grave today, and I asked her about this. And my mom got mad at me because I was never supposed to have found this out. And she wanted to know who told me in the family because her and one other person was supposed to be the only ones who knew. And it was supposed to die with them.
Candy.
And I said, what happened? She's like, my grandmother's first husband died in World War II. She married his cousin a year later,
Mm.
and no one showed up to the wedding. And it was a huge scandal. And I was like, Grandma. And so she's like, my mom genuinely thinks you found this out somehow. And I was like, I did from your dead grandma.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most memorable moments to me because I truly was like, I'm about to be laughed off the face of this planet. Mediumship is fake. There's no way this is real. And when she said that, I was like, never trust human beings
Yeah.
again.
Yes.
Only trust the dead. And
Right.
so I had a few experiences like that over time. And I'm like, they said, and I've worked with my clairaudience because that's mainly how I work, is that I listen to them and I'll lay in my bed when I do readings. I'll just lay down because I have a back injury, I have a traumatic back injury. And so I'll lay down, I'll get relaxed, I'll zen out, and I'll just listen to them talk and I'll just spill their story. And I'll get some images from time to time and I'll feel how they died and all that normal stuff. But I just listen to them tell me their story. And in Cajun folklore, storytelling is a big thing. So I love honoring being a Cajun that way. As a healer, as a faith healer, traiteurs, we do healing, hands-on healing, and I do my hands-on healing with crystals. And I don't know if you can see them, but I have crystals all over my house. Um, and I was teaching a crystal healing class, and um, I was talking about how to, through being able to see past lives and things that I do, I can sometimes remove traumatic past life trauma. And I had one of my clients I was teaching, she was like, I can feel something and I don't know what it is. And I was like, well, let me step in, let me see what's, because we would bring in people who would get free hands-on healing to let my students practice. And I go up to her and I said, you have dreams about being killed with an axe? And she's like, I do. I said, you have this pain here along your rib line, correct? And she's like, yes. I said, I can feel this like, axe embedded into your side. And I
Wow.
said, and there's some past life trauma there. I said, I'd be happy to remove it, but I need your permission to do this specific thing. And I said, because everything with me is very about consensual. Like I don't care if you've given me consent from the beginning. Everything I do requires consent. And so, because that's called respect. Um, and so she's like, yeah. So I said, I'm going to do this because I don't know how to explain to you right now how to do this because this is kind of rare. So I'm healing, doing work, and I see myself remove the axe, and I can feel it pulling it out of like Jello, and I feel like I'm holding something that's like 10 pounds, and I like drop it on the floor, and everybody goes, "Ooh!" And everyone's like, we could hear a thud in the room.
Wow.
And everyone was like, you could feel the room shake, like someone just like dropped a 10-pound weight on the floor.
Right.
And the people behind me couldn't really see what I was doing and didn't know what I was doing. So I wasn't explaining everything. I was just getting it done. That way I could explain it after. And when I dropped it, someone went, did you just drop it on the floor? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, we all felt it. Because they're behind me and I'm not looking at them. And they're like, whoa. And so so I wanted to mention these three things because and she said she felt better that the pain in her side had gone away. Not saying that I cured her of anything. Just want to clarify that. But I wanted to mention these three things because as a healer, I work in all aspects. I work as a hands-on healer as a traiteur, which is very important to me because my background as Cajun. I work as a medium and I work as a psychic, and I believe all of that is connected to me being a traiteur and a Cajun because I think that's all part of my heritage. Um, but I want people out there to know that like there are these separate experiences that you could have. If mediumship doesn't work for you, try hands-on healing.
Right.
If hands-on healing doesn't work, try tarot or divination or psychic work.
Mhm.
I've had experiences where my work worked in all aspects. I don't do them all the time. I'm slowly trying to get back to working hands-on because I worked in the hospitals during COVID, and I have been very agoraphobic since, which anyone who worked in hospitals understands that. And so, but um, I want people to understand that not everyone is meant for every aspect. I do equal psychic mediumship now because that's my passion as a mental mediumship, giving messages. I don't do seance. I don't do physical mediumship. I love doing platform or do demonstrations. I just haven't had the access to do that right now. Um, I wanted to mention all three also just because I want people to see that um, spirituality, energy, healing, mediumship, intuition, it's all woven together in the tapestry of energy and life and afterlife. And um, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, if you are drawn to finding a thread in that tapestry, you're drawn to it for a reason. And it may not be reading tarot. I know people who just can't do it. I know people who just don't know how to talk to me, just can't seem to grasp
Right.
doing mediumship,
Right.
but are amazing hands-on healers, and vice versa in every single way. So there are experiences to be had in all realms, and not all of them need to be. You could have experiences as a medium and never do it again. I knew someone who took mediumship classes with me, and she was a detective, and she did it because she wanted to be able to communicate with the dead of spirits that she uh, uh, worked on their crimes. And so you can find a path in if in
Right.
this industry if you are interested in this path. I'm not saying industry, but in this avenue.
I love those stories. Absolutely incredible. And tell us about this will be posted Saturday, whatever that date is, Saturday of this week. Tell us what specials or what you have upcoming, and everything will be linked below in the description to get a hold of Sean.
So everything's on my website, psychic-sean.com. That's psychic-sean.com. Um, and I have email readings. I have over the phone. I read for people all around the world. I am a international medium. I read through WhatsApp, through Zoom, like we're doing now. Um, so it doesn't matter where you come from, as long as you speak English, I can work for you. I have also had people interpret for others. It's not as comfortable because sometimes things get lost in interpretation,
Right.
but I have done it. And if you're willing to try it, I'm willing to work for you. But yeah, so all that's there. I try to make myself as accessible as possible. I go live on TikTok doing affordable readings. Uh, I do email readings because they're affordable. Some people just don't have the time to make appointments and they don't want to
Right.
sit through a whole session. So I don't have any specials running right now, but my prices are relatively inexpensive compared to a lot of others because I look at this work as something that I do to make a living from it. I want to pay my bills, but I'm also not trying to buy a 40-foot yacht.
Right.
So
Right.
I would really like to be able to just put food on my table and be able to experience maybe going on a vacation for my birthday overnight somewhere. But I am not I am perfectly happy with making it just so it's affordable. But yeah, I don't do in-person readings right now. It is something I'm working towards. But for the most part, it's
All
you
on your
do it online, do it over the phone. You be in your pajamas, I'll be in mine, and we'll just have a little,
website.
we'll have some coffee chat.
Thank you so much, Sean. I absolutely love this conversation and I cannot wait for part two. And as I said earlier, everything will be linked below to get a hold of Sean. And I just really appreciate you being here. Thank you
Thank you
so
so much for
much.
having me, Nick. I loved it. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.